The Archetype of the Trans-Dimensional Torus. Yo, what's going on YouTube? It's someone that's no one, and welcome to today's report. Today's report is coming from Jared, which was sent in. This happened in the fall. The drugs used was LSD, gender, male, dose. It was either between 300 and 345 UGs, or 100 to 115 UGs per tab. And his prior experience leading up to this was he was experienced with psychedelics, but it was the first time actually taking this high of a dose. And where this happened, it was at his house, a rooftop, and a botanical garden, all which was in Brooklyn, New York. So this is a pretty classic LSD experience, and I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy it. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. I've used psychedelics, LSD, mushrooms, before in several instances, but I had never used them in this capacity before. LSD was my favorite drug. I've taken it at least 8 times prior at the time, with doses only up to 100-ish UGs. And each trip, -1, had given me a good experience. I was eager to experience what more it had to offer. I had recently scored 3 tabs of what I had already personally tested with a test kit and experimented with months prior. They were particularly strong, having been lab tested at 99.95% purity, according to my good friend and dealer who acquired it from a very reputable online source. The average dose on a tab would have been 100 to 115 UG, and I'm not talking about the kind of 100 UGs that your high school dealer used to scalp you with. Not to mention, the tabs had a cartoon version of Bernie Sanders as Buddha, which was something funny and unique, although I am somewhat apolitical. Long story short, these were the best tabs I could ever hope to have. Anyway, so as the very last of these were being sold, I acquired 3. My plan was to take 2 and have an extra because I knew even just 1 was a pretty full-on trip. It was morning on a Friday in Brooklyn, a very early autumn day. I took the 2, ready to blast off. An hour had passed, and I had felt generally pretty normal, which was unusual for this Lucy. My mind flashed back to 2 weeks prior, where I acquired an 1/8 of mushrooms, which I had kept for several weeks, and when I downed them, they had barely any effect at all. That was a big reason for the dose of this trip, because I wanted to have the full-on experience. I had a sudden urge to down the 3rd and last tab. It was met with little opposition, and I proceeded, but I truly did not know what I was doing. This was the first proper trip I had undertaken alone. I did not have to wait much longer. It was kicking in, hard, but it wasn't super visual at this point. I just remember the silence in my room growing into my brain like it was some kind of spiderweb-like virus. I immediately felt a sense of impending doom with undertones of psychosis. My brain felt like it was processing on only a binary level, almost as if I could notice the very base functions of my brain. For instance, I spent what was probably several Earth minutes doing the following. I would look out the window, the sun would be bright, there would be children playing in the playground across the street, people living their lives. I would look away, back into my room, with my mind spinning. I'm so confused. What's happening? How long has it been? After about 10 Earth seconds, I would look outside again. The sun was out again. Does that mean it was a new day? I'd look away confusedly again, forgetting the previous questioning of reality. Look outside again. Wait, is it a new day? It happened like so for what seemed to be several weeks. There was one daunting thought bubbling up among the confusion and the silence. I am not coming out of this room today unless it's in a hospital gurney. Yep, I did it this time. I ruined my life, wasted my parents' money on college, and now the person that we know and love is forever gone. Lost to the oceans of psychosis forever. I'm not sure how this thought came about, but my next memory in this rabbit hole of despair is the only way out of this is if I die. The last question you ever want your mind to cross on any drug. I realized the only wise choice was to bite the bullet, contact my girlfriend, tell her what the actual dose was. I told her I was only doing a tab, and have a sober person tell me I'm okay. So I Skype her. She was in Europe at the time, which was a whole other layer of this interaction highlighted by the trip, but that's besides the point. The conversation went a bit like this. Me: hey, I took too much acid. I'm freaking out. I'm so confused. Her: how much did you take? Me: I was only going to take 2, but I took 3. Her: I thought you were only taking 1. Me: yeah, but I'm so confused. Her: me: babe, I'm so confused. 5 Earth minutes later. Me: babe, I'm so confused. 2 Earth minutes later. Me: babe, I'm so confused. It went on like this for several minutes. The Skype interaction was very laggy, and that was kind of tripping me out. At one time, I distinctly remember that my point of view was almost like my whole field of vision was this 2D screen. And each new moment that occurred, the screen would zoom out slightly and turn a new frame back on itself, almost like a flipbook animation. Obviously, around this time is where things start to get really inexplicable. My girlfriend eventually suggests I call my good friend Iz. I call him and awkwardly make it clear that I'm tripping and I needed him. Thank God he picked up. He arrived and I awkwardly changed my clothes. I was wearing basketball shorts and a tie-dye, so I felt like they had to go if I were to go outside. I was very happy that I finally had a real person in front of me, and it made me feel less confused. After I dressed, we left the building and I felt the majesty of the sun bless my skin with happiness. I looked over at Iz, and his head was totally distorted, making him look like a wise, interdimensional extraterrestrial, but I found it very interesting and not at all threatening. We were on our way. Where? I don't know. I trusted Iz. He was a seasoned tripper, a more spiritually advanced person than I at the time, and a Rastafarian. That's good enough for me. So we snuck into some apartment building and went to the roof. Now, we've all seen roofs, but this one was very special to me in this moment for some reason. The roof was covered in metallic silverish paint. This was not me tripping. This is how some Brooklyn roofs are, and absolutely covered in different tags and street art. The texture of the roof gave me the impression that I was a giant in some futuristic valley, and the large brush-like impressions in the painted tar gave impressions of landscapes. Iz was smoking a joint. I don't recall hitting it, because I really didn't need it, but it's possible I hit it once or twice. This experience happened to me years ago. As I sat in the shade of the doorway onto the roof, I gazed out off the roof. Then perhaps the most profound and inexplicable thing that I have experienced on psychedelics occurred. I was gazing out into a manifested Torus-like shape which eternally fed into itself. It was like it was actually in 3D space in front of me, but it was also projected clearly into my mind's eye, so I'm unsure whether or not I was seeing this in reality or superimposed on top of it. This vision made me feel immense contentment and understanding of nature. There seemed to be the symbolic value in its structure which communicated to me several truths about the nature of reality and time. For example, the torus is a circle made out of circles, which had some kind of cosmic importance I have yet to unpack. This is a particularly interesting visionary experience to me because this kind of torus seems to be a vision shared by many artists, me being one of them. Alex Gray, among others, depicts a very similar phenomenon which occurred to him. After this episode of ecstasy, we proceeded to leave for he had class very soon. We were in college. I had gone back to the room where it all started, alone again. The uneasy feelings began to fester almost immediately, and I made one of the best decisions of this trip, to go to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. This is a plant life conservatory of immeasurable beauty. The sensory experience of seeing, feeling, and smelling plants while tripping is unmatched, and I've tripped several times in art museums, parks and gardens alike. The walk to the garden was a little long, but manageable, something between 1 and 2 miles. I put on my headphones and listened to Avi Ter's slasher flicks, which provoked several auditory hallucinations, something I had never encountered before with such pronunciation. This was a fantastic sonic experience, one I frequently look back on fondly. As I arrived at the Botanic Garden, I realized I was a good amount past the peak, but still raging like a fire. The plant life seemed to be physical manifestations of the lessons I had acquired previously in the trip, their fractalized, harmonious structures being monuments to the passage of time combined with nature. Nothing could be more true or beautiful. It would be hard to document all of the experiences within the garden, because the plant life was so diverse. But notable exhibits were the bonsai trees, the conservatories for rainforest and temperate forest, and the Japanese garden. Endless material for my hunger for stimulus to feast on. As I began coming down, I just relaxed under the yellowing trees. Eventually, I took a car service home, which at first I was very confused as to whether or not I belonged in there or if this Uber pool driver kidnapped me. Eventually, I see we're heading toward my home, so I chill out. I'm not so sure about what happened when I returned home, but it probably ended in a night of smoking ganja and reflection. What I learned: endless things about the nature of my brain, reality, time, etc. Pros: it was the most intense experience I have ever had, and I'd say 75% of it was fantastic. Cons: it was the most intense experience I've ever had, and 25% of it felt like it could have induced a bit of trauma. As in the months afterward, there was a period of depression. I'm not saying it was brought on just by this experience, but it probably didn't help that I had an existential terror experience. Also, I forgot to mention that my girlfriend was very anxious about my well-being during my trip, because, like always during a trip, my correspondence with her was sparse. It pretty much went like this. Me: I'm with Iz. Me: we're on a roof. Her: where? About an hour later. Me: I don't know, I'm walking to the Botanic Garden. Her: by yourself? Hour later. Me: yes. And so on. Conclusion: it was my most intense and profound trip to date. It really gave me perspective on what these drugs can really do, and it taught me a lot about myself, reality, and psychedelics. 2 multi-dimensional thumbs up.